I have not throat, but I can wail. I have no hands, but I can touch you. The Book of Elemental Powers. Hello, I am Sensei the Dark Master, and welcome back to the Lore of Ninjago. In today's video, we shall be continuing our coverage of the elemental powers of Ninjago. This time, we shall be covering the wonderful elemental power of wind. We shall discuss the element's history, the powers it grants a user, those people, creatures, and objects that have utilized this elemental power, its weaknesses, and more. Let us start with the element's history. The origins of the wind as an element is rather unique, as, like that of water, it was not first created by the first Spinjitzu master. Rather, it originated from the primordial sea serpent Wojira, who used wind and wave to create storms that allowed her to rule over the chaotic primordial ocean that would eventually become Ninjago. Eventually, thanks to a combined effort by the first Spinjitzu master, the first elemental master of water, Naiad, the Merlopians, and the Keepers, Wojira was defeated and sent into great slumber. Sometime afterwards, the first elemental master of wind came into existence. It is unknown whether they were taught this power by the first Spinjitzu master or got it independently, like Naiad did. This transition for wind is unfortunately and somewhat ironically up into the air. This first elemental master of wind passed their power to their children, who then did so to their children, and this process continued for over 100 generations until it passed to the homeless street urchin known as Moro. This young boy would be found by Sensei Wu when he was rummaging through the garbage, who taught him as his first student and pupil, and led the boy to believe that he would become the Green Ninja prophesied to save all of Ninjago. When it became self evident that Moro would not be the Green Ninja, as the golden weapons did not react upon him touching them, he huffed and felt the need to try to prove Destiny wrong. He did this by getting into a bunch of trouble and eventually died in the Caves of Despair while searching for the tomb of the first Spinjitzu master, and his spirit was banished to the Cursed Realm for his arrogance. He would later escape this imprisonment when Garmadon sacrificed himself to stop Chin's army at the end of the Second Serpentine War during the Battle of the Corridor of Elders. Moro would lead a ghostly invasion upon Ninjago, utilizing his wind powers to release the preeminent and possess Lloyd Garmadon, in effect becoming the Green Ninja, though not exactly in the way Destiny intended. In the end, however, after Nia got her true potential and defeated Preeminent, he realized he was wrong and beyond saving, and gives Wu the Realm Crystal to save Lloyd after sacrificing himself into the ocean. Moro and Wind would return in the Day of the Departed when he would make amends with Wu. Skylar would later interact with Wind in some point when looking for her mother, though we'll return to this in a bit. Now that we have covered the history of the element, let us discuss those individuals who have wielded this great power. The most noteworthy individual is, of course, Moro, who is the only named elemental master of wind and the main antagonist of possession. The other unnamed users include the first elemental master of wind. And via the Whirlwand, there was another user known as the magician Egon the Extraordinary, though he wasn't all that extraordinary at all, really. He was just a guy using a magical artifact. In terms of creatures, the first to wield the elemental power of wind was Firstborn, the oldest and obviously first dragon to be born. Then there was the entire subgroup known as wind dragons, which had the power to breathe strong air or wind blasts from their mouths, fly at high speeds, and manipulate clouds. There was also Wojira, the primordial serpent, who I described earlier, and who utilized the power of wind and water to control what would eventually become Ninjago. In terms of objects that have wielded the elemental power of wind, firstly, the amulets of Wojira are believed to have some power over wind, especially the storm amulet, though it is also believed to be a lesser extent true of the wave amulet. Also, there was the whirlwind, which I mentioned earlier, who was created by the first elemental master of Amber, who was getting rather jealous of the other elemental masters and stole a small portion of wind elemental energy from a unnamed elemental master of wind and put it into the wand to give it a little power. Though, admittedly, this is a rather weak artifact. Now that we've covered the objects that have wielded the power, let us cover the many abilities that the power of wind grants upon a user. The primary ability is Aerokinesis, which allows the user to control and generate the winds, such as when Moro created a gust of wind to blow the ninja around. He can create a powerful air current to attract objects and people by pulling the wind towards himself. The user are able to release bolts, waves, spirals, pulses, blasts, spheres, and or bursts of wind, and to use them to damage and push people around. This ability is able to send wind through any form of matter that isn't solid, such as creating ripples and pulses that they can spread through almost anything. Also, it can be used possibly underwater and to move objects from a distance. With Aerokinetic Flight, the user can fly using the wind. In effect, they levitate. It's sort of similar to the elemental power of gravity, though because it is wind and not gravity, it's not nearly as steady, and people just tend to sort of hover and vibrate a little bit. With tornado generation, the user can create a large vortex of air around themselves to attack, confuse, and defend against an adversary, and can be used for travel. With tornado spinning, the user can spin like a tornado for both offensive and defensive purposes. Note, this is distinct from air jitsu, which Moro had to learn separately, indicating that they're two separate abilities. With air solidification, the user can manipulate pressure between air molecules to solidify the air and use it to attack or defend against an adversary's attack. It has two subpowers: air shield construction and air wall generation. With air shield construction, the user can create a shield of solid air to avoid attacks, while with air wall generation, the user can create a wall of solid air slash wind from nothing, or by shaping the existing air slash wind. Wind has a single higher level power, that being the fury of the storm, which, when used in conjunction alongside water, the user can create waves and storms. When at full power, this can result in a giant tsunami that affects a realm and has power over the endless sea that causes excessive flooding and severe property damage. Wind is associated with the color dark green, and while we don't really know the true symbol, Moro does have a corrupted ghost dragon, which is pretty cool, and considering that Moro is the only person of note to wield it, that might as well be the symbol for air. In terms of weaknesses, the elemental power of air is sadly not all that useful against very solid materials, such as, say, a mountainside, though it can be surprisingly strong. So, in the end, what can we learn from the elemental power of wind? We learn that there is a danger to striking out on one's own without needed perspectives or knowledge. We also learn the dangers of arrogance, that if we let our delusions guide our way of thinking, we can descend to a bad end that honestly blows. It is best to prepare and act smart, otherwise, you will be sucked away. I'm Sensei the Dark Master, and join me next time on the Lore of Ninjago. Have a wonderful day and subscribe if you like this sort of content.